So a few weeks ago I released a video that was, for the most part at least, shot in 8K, and I've had a few requests to break down just how I did it without dropping $50,000 on a camera. So without any further ado, let's break down shooting 8K video on a shoestring budget. The camera I used for this was the Sony a7R Mark II for the simple reason of it having a really high resolution sensor, 42 megapixels to be exact. Now, 8K, while crazy high in terms of video resolution being 4x 4K, is actually pretty standard for high-end stills territory these days, at just 33 megapixels per frame. By taking a series of frames on the a7R Mark II and then playing them back one at a time, it's more than possible to capture true 8K footage without needing a RED. Of course, when dealing with high-resolution footage like this, you can't really just drop it directly into a timeline and expect things to go well. The raw files I shot came at 44 megabytes per frame, or just over a gigabyte per second of footage, which is just a crazy amount of data to deal with. So the first thing I did was open up all my shots in Lightroom where I balanced out the exposure, cleaned up any sensor dirt, and corrected for lens distortions, then exported this all into a much friendlier JPEG sequence. Still, I found that this was too much to be editable on my system, so what I did was generate some low-resolution H.264 proxies of my footage, which was a vast improvement to performance. They might look nasty, but they let me edit and color grade the video with no problems. When it came the time to export, I relinked the JPEG sequences and created a rather giant DNxHD export for YouTube. I generally use H.264 for this, but the codec itself doesn't support 8K, so I had to pick something else that I knew would work, and DNxHD fit nicely. With that uploaded to YouTube, thank God for gigabit upload, I needed a solution that would archive the project. As nice as keeping the really high quality 48GB DNxHD master would be, I really can't afford to keep files that big around forever, so I turned to H.264's successor, H.265. While support for this format is still in its infancy, it's incredibly efficient, so it could cut the file size to something more acceptable for my use. With all of this in mind, there are a few things that I probably would have done differently were I to try this kind of thing again. Firstly, I'd use something other than H.264 for my proxy files. I didn't really have any problems with fluidity once I was using them, but using Cineform or DNxHD would have made my whole editing experience just that little bit smoother. Secondly, I'd have left a lot more time to shoot. This whole video was shot in just under 2 days, which when you consider the fact that it's tough to scout locations and plan in advance, that really wasn't enough time. This meant that I didn't really have as much footage as I might have wanted, meaning I had to repeat some shots in the final video, which is something that I don't like to have to do. Finally, I'd have made sure to get multiple takes of as many shots as possible. With quite a few shots, I thought I'd nailed it, but once I got to the edit, it turned out that the footage was just far too bumpy and completely unusable. Now, you might have noticed at this point that I haven't talked at all about my workflow for the non-time-lapse parts, and there's a pretty simple reason for that. Those were just shot in straight 4K and edited off the timeline. Now, while I could have messed around compositing with stills to try and fake it properly, this really brings me to a more important point. Technical quality really doesn't matter after a point. Not one person mentioned in a comment that they noticed a drop in quality, let alone that it affected their viewing experience in any way. So yes, while I can see the clear difference between my true 8K and 4K footage because I know what I'm looking for, most people simply can't tell or don't care. At the end of the day, a good video is good no matter how many pixels it's comprised of. A standard definition DVD of pretty much any film will look miles better than my 8K footage simply because of the extra time, care, and skill that's gone into the production process. At the end of the day, no matter whether you're shooting on a phone, a somewhat dated DSLR, or the latest cameras from Red or Arri, what matters is what you put in front of your lens rather than the sensor behind it. Anyway, as ever, thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.